The Veteran Sherman may be the most important wheel release of the year since it's not just a new electric unicycle, but a brand new EUC company. Based on spec, it is also the fastest and longest range electric unicycle on the market with a higher free spin and top speed than any other wheel, including the current speed king, the Gotway MSX 100V. Will it survive the torture test from the speed demons of the New York City EUC crew? And it's designed and built by a team of people who are very much out to dethrone Gotway, the current top dog in the performance EUC world. And thanks to Jason from eWheel, we're gonna get a chance to find out. This week, we review the Veteran Sherman. Roll the intro! As always, if you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe and stay to the end for a preview of what's coming up next. Disclaimer time! This pre-production unit was provided by eWheel for my review purposes, and an affiliate link will be provided in the video description below in case if you're interested in getting in on the pre-order action. Woo! Giant bump! As always, opinion expressed is strictly my own. Now I reached out to Veteran to get a little bit more background in their company. However, they weren't really willing to discuss it. So unfortunately, the only thing we had to go on was an article provided by EcoDrift in which they had stated that the people behind Veteran were all prior Gotway employees who, because of an internal wheel design disagreement, decided to strike out and form their own separate EUC startup, and this was the result. A 20-inch wheel with 2500 watt motor and a whopping 3200 watt hour battery pack. Even larger than my extended range monster, the Gotway pedigree is immediately obvious. Its boxy and industrial looking casing is a far cry from the slim profile of the InMotion design wheels or the more sculpted Hsiang wheels. And I like it. It reminds me of some sort of heavy duty military equipment or even an off-road vehicle. And I especially like this steel tubular framing that had around the perimeter of the case, since one of my pet peeves had always been how fragile the Gotway wheel shell had been. And not only does it provide solid protection for the wheel itself, the steel tubular framing has a solid connection below the pedal hanger. It felt solid and reassuring, and at 3/4 inch diameter provide excellent mounting points for any sort of accessory with a clamp, lights, GoPro, or whatever you can think of. But the real question is, does it actually protect the wheel housing in the event of a crash? And the only way to find out. This happened during our acceleration test, which I'll talk about later in more detail. But if this was a Gotway wheel, it would have shattered since it's all plastic. We see this happen all the time. Instead of tumbling, the Sherman slid on its frame like a pair of skis and simply came to a stop. All that the casing suffered with some minor scuff. This is what a Gotway wheel will look like after a similar crash. The steel framing alone is an incredible upgrade and made any all-plastic wheel casing on performance wheel felt simply obsolete by comparison. The headlights and the taillights does feel slightly exposed, and the crash bent the mounting bracket below the headlight, but again, since they are modular, it's just a matter of unplugging and replacing it with a new unit. Absolutely brilliant. We may even be able to upgrade it ourselves. There's an LCD panel above the wheel that gives you speed and battery information in a nice large readable format. First, for any electric unicycle, and it's actually pretty helpful since I prefer not having my phone out while riding at full speed. There is a trolley handle, but unlike the one on the MSX, it actually aligns with the axle and is closer to the center of mass, which means that it's a lot better at controlling the wheel. Overall, especially seeing it after the crash, the build quality of the Veteran Sherman is unmatched by any other performance wheels on the market. I actually find it slightly mind-boggling that we have been riding essentially motorcycle made out of plastic. I can't imagine going back to it after seeing this wheel.
But of course, since it is not a toaster, what really matters is how it rides. My biggest question had been about its torque capability. The MSP, which also had a 2500 watt motor, was a beast when it comes to its torque output. However, it suffered a significant cap to its top speed because of it. And although the Sherman could not match it in terms of torque output, and I'll explain a little on how we're able to know that later on in the performance section. But the real question is, will it match or better the MSX 100 volt, which is the true benchmark when it comes to high-speed performance electric unicycle?
Oh my god, yes. The amount of acceleration you crank out is absolutely mind-boggling. This is an electric unicycle with an acceleration and speed that come close to that of a motorcycle. I was easily able to leap ahead of cars and eventually ran up against the traffic light, which is timed to accommodate a vehicle driving at about 32 miles per hour. I'm usually not a huge torquer of wheels, and I never rode with any speed pads either, but with a pair of pads, the Sherman absolutely flies. Ergonomically, it's rather wide wheel, and the Russian pads I used added too much bulk and made my leg bow out uncomfortably. The custom pads Veteran, including the final product release, will likely be better, but there's no denying that this is the fastest wheel I have ever rode, by a good margin.
Now I have mentally prepared myself to ride the 77-pound wheels. I reason that since my current regular ride is the extended range monster, and at 65 pounds is the largest and heaviest electric unicycle on the market. And I was hoping that it wouldn't take much for me to learn to wrestle this even heavier wheel.
And this is especially important to me since, like many of my fellow NYC uni rider, I can't seem to keep to a straight line. There are some good reasons why we do ride this way. Acceleration, stability, the need to dodge potholes, pedestrian, and it's flat out fun, so there's that. After all, when you ski or snowboard, you don't just ride in a straight line right downhill, you lean and carve, and that's how we ride, and surprisingly, for reasons unfathomable to me, this wheel feels no heavier than an MSP once you get it going. Now, agility of an electric unicycle is also partly a function of torque and balance, and at any speed I dare to venture, even up to the 40s, I never felt the torque curve wavering. Not even a tiny bit. The accelerations just seem to go on and on.
Balance, on the other hand, is a subtle but equally important subject. Most Gotway wheels, unfortunately, are poorly balanced because of the location of its control board on the side, which guarantees unequal battery distribution. Sherman, on the other hand, has the advantage of placing its control board on the top of the wheel. With two equally sized battery compartments mirror on either side, the result is a much better balanced wheel, and it also carries those weights lower than what typical Gotway wheel does.
The Sherman is surprisingly stable, and I know stability since my regular ride is the rock-solid 22-inch monster. Perhaps the greater weight in the balance arrangement actually helped improve stability, or maybe it was the stiffer steel frame that helped better the overall structural rigidity. Whatever it was, I ended up hitting some pretty rough patch of pavement, including potholes that caused the wheel to jump and land at an angle, which at speed is usually super sketchy, but the Sherman was never shaken. Instead, the spongy tire seemed to have just absorbed the hit and keep on rolling. And speaking of the tire, the off-road stock tire at 35 psi felt surprisingly cushy, and although I do wonder how a more road-oriented tire would feel, there's something attractive about its springy sponginess that seemed to strike an excellent balance, especially in New York City where the roads often are poor and potholes plenty.
So it looks good and it's a blast to ride, but the question remains, despite the fact that this is an established team coming out of Gotway, it is still a brand new company introducing their very first wheel. Will they be able to design, engineer, and build a reliable wheel when Gotway is still struggling with pulling that off?
For that, we need to take a peek inside, and since I'm an idiot when it comes to electrical stuff, I found some people who are not.
Hi, Chris. How are you doing? Everyone is Hsiang, aka House of Job, who is the most knowledgeable local rider I know, and he also just about wrote and took apart every single EUC ever made. So if anything don't look right, he knows. Now this is just an excerpt of our teardown since the technical detail may not be to everyone's taste, and I'll be releasing a longer behind the scene video where Chris really get into the nitty gritty of this wheel separately for those who are interested. In summary, although there was some concern about waterproofing, as this is not a wheel you will want to ride in a downpour, and despite its obvious Gotway heritage. Chris, can you repeat that statement about this being a little bit better than Gotway, please?
I didn't deny that.
Now it is time to properly test the true performance of this wheel. But first, know that the intention of these tests is to push the wheel to the very limit of its capability, which is inherently sketchy to do, and that the people who are going to participate in these tests all had accumulated thousands of miles of ride experiences and know exactly the risk involved, as well as how to mitigate as much of it as possible. So I guess what I'm saying is, please do not try these at home. First, the induced pedal dip. If you crank the wheel hard enough while stationary, you can overcome the motor. This is called a pedal dip. Since the electric motor has 100% torque at 0 RPM, this gives us a sense of how much the torque the wheel has. We're able to do it with the Sherman and the MSX, but not the MSP, which is the only wheel that we were not able to overcome. So we do know that it has more torque. The induced pedal dip, when practiced, will also allow the rider to extract the maximum amount of acceleration from a wheel, since it allows you to push it right up to the edge of the motor failure point, and yet sometimes we do push it a little bit too far, and this is what a cutout crash look like close up. A reminder of why you shouldn't be trying this at home. And the wheel is at about 50% battery, and he is essentially trying to induce a pedal dip to maximize acceleration, and with enough practice, you can pull out of it. Remember, this is not a normal usage, not even something that our most extreme rider would do on the street. It was a braking test, not to see if the wheel will brake, but rather how it will brake. Alex is a 280-pound, very skillful rider. If he wants to cut out a wheel, he will. Doesn't matter which one it is. He done so on the MSX 100V just the same. Coming out of this, his concern had been that with Gotway cutouts, there's usually a small window of resistance from the motor, where in here he did not feel it. Veteran had been notified of this issue and has said that they were going to issue a firmware update to address it. But again, this is something that you should never attempt. If you hear your wheels start to beep, you should ease up on the acceleration and not push it, because this is what can happen. We're still arguing over whether or not it has more torque than the MSX, but the fact that I'm able to pass our fastest rider, who is 70 pounds lighter and a foot shorter, in a full tuck on the MSX make me think that this is the faster wheel. We also try riding them downstairs. Not hard to do if you know how, or riding upstairs, which doesn't work because the corner of the tubular framing actually catch the nosing on the stair. You can jump it pretty well, but you'll need good pads, and it can also handle a few drops decently as well. We try to peel out on gravel because, I don't know, it's cool. But the goal of all these tests are to understand the true limitation of this wheel, so as to understand how much leeway we really have. So the conclusion?
It's good, it's solid.
Yeah.
Really? It's fucking solid. I would love to talk a bunch of shit. I'd love to say like, oh, it's just a fucking MSX motor. I feel like it has a little more than the MSX motor. It does. So on your Gotway, you get your beep, 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 beep. This doesn't do that. This does beep, 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 beep. Beep, beep, beep. It like does this weird multi-beep at the end of it.
Motherfucker!
But even when you're doing that, so on a Gotway, when you're riding your fourth and fifth beep, you're getting that like pedal dip where you're like, for that second, you know if you push it any harder, you're going down. That's doing 5 beeps and I'm not getting that. 7? Why didn't you all tell me it was 7? I'm counting 5 and slowing down. You mean I can go faster?
Yes, you did!
What do I think of this wheel? I think it's about damn time. Gotway had no competition in the 40 miles per hour plus high-speed performance electric unicycle market, and in my opinion, the M Super line of wheels, which is the flagship product of that particular segment, has stagnated for the past 5 years. And their hardcore ridership that followed that particular wheel had no choice but to resort to dangerous mod in order to get the feature and option that they need. But this is finally it. The Sherman improves on the MSX. It's better built, engineered, and it's more capable with a higher top speed and improved acceleration. But not only that, this is a wheel that is greater than the sum of its parts. It rode beautifully, it's agile and well balanced, and that stability feeding to your confidence to push and maintain speed you never would on any other wheels. This isn't just an improved Gotway MSX, this is an electric unicycle that is on a whole different level, and I find it difficult to convey the sense of joy of riding this wheel and pushing its limit, and it's something you have to experience if you love to ride an EUC. And finally, a special shout out to the NYCE skate crew for their help with testing this wheel. As much as they may be polarizing and rage-inducing on the web, you won't find a group of individuals that love electric unicycle more. And let me just say that as much as EUC is a fun hobby for you and me, for them, riding is life. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and if you like to support my work, check out the link to my Patreon page in the video description. And finally, as much as we all love electric unicycle, the only way for us to get better wheels is to grow as a community. So tell your friends and teach them how to ride and get them hooked. And until next week, thank you. Coming up next, more on the Veteran Sherman, a behind-the-scenes look at the demo process, unboxing and teardown of the wheel. Don't miss it if you're as obsessed about the Sherman as I am.